beating Anish in last month's Oslo Esports Cup, beating him a couple of times in Vikensee, Dutch Championships. If anything, Jorden is in Anish's head.
And he actually told me that when I was doing the interview with him during the Masters. He said that I never beat Jorden, so forget about it. He beats me every time. We're going to get started here instead. It's an opening, David.
It is, and it's the Reti opening, actually one that we focused a lot on yesterday. One of my favourite first moves, White bringing out the knight. And the Reti, the beauty of it is that White is super flexible. Now White can choose which pawn to push. Is Jorden going to push? Okay, this is maybe the third or fourth most popular option in that position. If that, pushing the b-pawn forward, getting ready to create a nice little home for White's dark-squared bishop. That White dark-squared bishop's going to park itself on the b2 square and fianchetto itself on the longest diagonal.
Yeah, this is it's interesting because when you see Jorden play and you see Anish is going the other way, fianchettoing, but he often tries to get Anish out of mainline theory because we know how strong Anish is in mainline. Double fianchetto system here, David. That is quite peculiar, isn't it? It's
not just peculiar, but it's very unlike Jorden. Normally he's quite direct, and part of the reason he's a core kind of member of Magnus Carlsen's team and previously part of Anish Giri's team is because he's so good at these attacking ideas where you calculate everything, and this is the type of position where...
Is B5 the speckled hen?
I was going to say.
Is it called the speckled hen?
Speckled hen.
Is that right?
Wow.
I remember Keith Arkle. Some openings have got ridiculous names, like the monkey's bum is one. I didn't just make that up, I think, but this might be called the speckled hen. I don't know if it's named after a beer in England or something else. Is that right?
Or... Speckled egg.
Oh, speckled egg. It might be the speckled egg.
But I think it's very similar to this. I think it's normally a slightly different variant, but it's definitely pushing that black b-pawn forward. And Simon, you mentioned those weird, wacky opening names. Stay tuned later in the week. I did do a test with Magnus on some weird, wacky opening names. And
did he know them all?
He didn't know them all.
Okay.
He knew some of them. And there are a lot of cool opening names. I think there's over 1,500 named openings out there. So
that's a lot.
Don't know how many you guys can name. I couldn't have named this one for sure.
Well, I just got this wrong. Was it the egg or the hen? Which came first?
The reason this is such a kind of weird opening is because now Black gains so much time. Black's pawn and gaining so much space as well. Black's pawns on this left flank throwing themselves forward. And
this is so strange. You know that there are only 2 games in my database. And yeah.
Wow.
And we're talking about a database of millions and millions of games. And it's bizarre. You know, I didn't guess any of those moves, actually, because I actually expected, and we talked a lot about this kind of whole concept of pawns dominating the knight circuit. But Anish has just taken that rule and just thrown it out the window, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to step forward and attack the knight.
Well, we can expect a chessable course on this soon, can't we, now? On the speckled, I don't know which one it is, speckled something.
The hen or the egg?
Yeah, the egg or the hen, maybe both. But
that could be your 29th Chessable course, Simon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've seen Peter Svidler play this way as well, actually, in a tournament in Ireland, the Bunratty tournament. Well, I think everyone's favourite tournament. Once you go there, you always want to go back. But this is more Jorden. This is more his style, isn't it?
This is really aggressive from Jorden, and we have to jump in and show what's just happened because with this last move, White pushing the pawn to the e4 square. Better late than never. He has set a small trap. This pawn is untouchable. It looks like it's undefended, but if you take it with the black knight, then suddenly you've opened up this diagonal for the white bishop, and suddenly the white bishop can actually go and take its counterpart on the g7 square. This bishop was undefended, and white wins a piece. So this pawn, you cannot touch it, and big question for Anish Giri. If you just castle, which is a very safe, logical move, then you have to decide what to do after white pushes even further forward, kicking away the knight.
We know what's coming after that move, maybe, don't we?
Once the black knight moves away, once it vacates the king side, the protection of black's king, then suddenly, as Simon mentions, we know what's coming. The h pawn is going to throw itself down the board.
Oh, yeah, baby.
This is the target, the black king.
That is a red rag to an h pawn, isn't it, that one? So,
I mean, we're not saying it's good for white. It probably isn't good for white, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun for us.
It's the Jorden thing to do, isn't it? It certainly is. And I remember Anish, actually, one thing about, maybe worth pointing out, he wrote about one of his games in New in Chess, which is a really good publication, and he was talking about the fianchetto bishops, and he pointed out, which I think is just something really worth remembering, that the fianchetto bishop on the king side, so if we see the ones on the right-hand side of the board where they're both fianchettoed, are better than the ones on the other side of the board, because you can guard that bishop with your king later on. And I always find that, you know, if you've got two bishops, as you have, pointing at each other, the one that's guarded by the king when it goes to castle is the better bishop, because it's more secure. And it's just something worth thinking about if you're trying to develop, you know, fianchetto sometimes, that little point.
That's interesting. I've never ever heard that rule before. So a bit of nugget of information there from Giri, and that must mean he quite likes his position if the black king does castle and guard the bishop in front of it. But he's hesitating, maybe just the ghosts of all those defeats to Jorden in the past, just saying, OK, don't castle the black king, don't make it a target for white's attack. Maybe black will just push a pawn, maybe to stop the advance of white's central pawn. It's already getting exciting.
I was going to ask, I mean, do you think that this opening is so random and so offbeat that Anish will be looking at really trying to neutralise it? Because there's kind of, we spoke about this a few days earlier, about how, you know, when your opponent plays something weird, it's annoying.
He's castled.
Oh,
he's castled, Jovanka.
okay.
He's going.
I think the problem with this opening is how do you neutralise it? All the pawns, all the pieces are still on the board, and okay,
come on, Harry.
We're following the variation we just showed.
Is it going to go? OK, hands in the air.
Like you just don't care.
Oh, what he's got? He's gone in.
Oh, OK. It's gone in the middle. Oh, OK.
Strange decision of where to put the black knight. It looks like the black knight is about to get trapped behind enemy lines in white's half of the board, but maybe that black knight does have a couple of escape squares to run to.
Yeah.
Interesting. This is already one of the weirdest positions I've seen in terms of openings on the tour this season, and it's only move 9. OK, white does finally complete the fianchetto of his light squared bishop, and black trying to break out, fighting for space in the centre now.
Yeah, this is a nice move, I think, that Anish has just played, because he was getting a little bit cramped in the centre of the board, and you can't let your opponent take all the space in the centre. And this last lunge, at least, is trying to grab some of that space back from the black side. Big question now, guys. Are we going to see en passant? Black's pawn has just moved 2 squares forward. White can just capture that pawn as if it's moved 1 square. So do you take this pawn off the board? Do you take with your own pawn, or do you leave it? If you leave this pawn on the board, then you have to step back with your own knight, and maybe suddenly these knights are a bit clumsy. Black's knight actually looks like it's the better piece, if anything. But if you take en passant, then suddenly there is tension between these 2 bishops. We could, for example, see a trade, and black's queen taking this pawn, black's pawn recapturing, and still, big question. This knight, fianchettoed knights are the worst pieces, unless they're defending a king. So, yeah, strange position, but big decision for you. We talked about en passant yesterday, actually, with Kaya, and we mentioned it's one of the hardest moves to grasp when you're trying to learn chess, because you're taking, but not on a square where there's a piece. You know, I think loads of people struggle with this. I remember myself, I was like, you can't do that. It took me ages trying to get used to this rule. So it's a strange one, capturing passing. Yeah, and then it only happens, to reinforce this, it only happens when your pawn is on the 5th rank and your opponent tries to bypass it by moving 2 squares forward. So your opponent's pawn has to move 2 squares forward. If it had just, for example, moved 1 square forward now, then you can't take it. Your opponent's pawn has to have moved 2 squares. But Jorden, he says no, he doesn't want to take this pawn, and he steps back with his knight. This is much more of a Jorden type of decision, keeping the tension, keeping pieces on the board. But as I mentioned, these 2 white knights, somehow they don't feel like they're that great anymore. There's nowhere for them to jump to later. Yeah, and black's position kind of suddenly looks harmonious, doesn't it? You know, he's got the centre, he's got gain more space, you know, his pieces, he's got natural posts. So I like Anish's position. I think he needed to capture that pawn. Yeah. Bit of style, isn't it? What happens now, for example, if black's bishop does come out, stopping white from castling, because now white can't castle through check. That's not legal. So now white's king is stranded in the centre of the board. If you try and block this bishop's diagonal, for example, pushing your pawn forward, then the black knight might be able to jump in. Yes, we could see a trade, for example, but now white has lost all control over the dark squares. Really, really imbalanced position. And Anish has been thinking for a long time, but OK, he does push his pawn forward, gaining more space. Very logical as well. Yeah, I think this is just Jorden trying to play against the man, not the board. He's trying to get inside Anish's head yet again and make it as imbalanced as possible. Yeah, that does remind me of that those tweets from yesterday's quiz of the day, where they say they try to play something creative and then spend their time going, why? Why did I do this? Why did I create my own problems? And
talking about tweets while the players are thinking. We're asking, what is your chess level? And Amin Shah Rivavi says that they're at the level that they can surprise and win against a 2200 rated player, which is a very strong level, and then immediately fall for a scholar's mate the next game. Oh.
What kind of level is that?
Inconsistent.
Very inconsistent.
Inconsistent.
That's good. You keep yourself guessing.
Yeah. And
I'm guessing.
yeah. And Obi-Wan Martin says that their chess level is foundation. Everyone else is using me to build their chess careers, trying to improve on lead chess by playing about 20 games every day and studying like crazy. Yeah, definitely that is the way to go if you want to improve your chess. Just keep playing chess, and there's lots of resources out there, like for instance Chessable, Chess24, and many, many more. If
you're at the very, very novice level, the beginner level, do you recommend playing more or reading more?
Both, actually.
Both, yeah.
I mean, there's such a wonder about being at the foundation level, about being a beginner, because everything is new to you. Mm-hmm. And, there's a delight that you get when you discover something that, you think, oh, eureka, I got it. And when you win your first game, there's nothing bigger, actually, than winning that game. I mean, you get a real adrenaline rush. I don't think you ever get that again.
It's these television broadcast is creating a really weird specimen of chess players sometimes, because you have players who's hardly ever played a game, and they still have some tactical dispositions and some understanding that they received from listening to a lot of players like you.
Yeah, and often they have that understanding, but putting that into practice is the hardest thing. So I would definitely recommend playing for a period, playing a bunch of games, but then mixing it up and then going through a study phase, back to playing, studying, and then just that kind of freshness will help improve. Meanwhile, a couple of moves. White did castle the king, very logical. White's king super safe. But after the black knight came out, White's rook centralizing. It does feel like White's pawn in the center of the board is a target.
Definitely, yeah.
Simon, do you think this game is maybe turning in Anish's favour?
Yeah, I do. I think we were very surprised about Anish's knight jump. You see the knight that's in White's half of the board, but this move, I think, which she played instantaneously, has turned out to be, I think, a great move, a fantastic move, because it has allowed the black pawn to come into the centre of the board. So that to me was a key move, showing great understanding by Anish. I mean, talking about learning as well, this is the Chessable leg, and Chessable is such a good resource if you want to learn openings. You might not find this opening because it's a little bit wacky, but if you're trying to get some basic opening knowledge, they've got loads of free stuff out there as well. So, loads of free courses, so you can start with that. You don't have to get your wallet out to start with. And then if you want to get the real professional tuition, then there's nearly a course and everything out there. So
and these short and sweet courses that you're referring to, they're amazing because you can actually still use their move trainer. And that's such a lovely way to learn chess. I mean, actually, I only used Wesley So's short and sweet course, and I just used it to kind of like build myself a repertoire by pushing the king's pawn. And it was fantastic.
Yeah, I was wondering, I know our main presenter today, he's a poker star, and, comes from a poker background, while I knock over all the drinks behind me. But do you have something similar in poker? Do you have, I know it's a different game, but do you have any ways you sort of have to repeat patterns to learn in that? Or is it quite unique to chess?
I think it's a lot of aspects that are quite similar. I think, from my understanding, a lot of poker players who's later started chess, they tend to have a pretty good understanding of a lot of middle game type situations, but they may not have the discipline that it takes to really try to get into the more learned part of chess. They have a lot of the intuitive stuff, and they never get there, because myself included, because it's so hard to accept the fact that you're not going to be instinctive about this. You haven't learned it at a young enough age, and you can't bring it to the level that you like to, because both are mind games. It's quite similar, yet so different that you can never push that threshold, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, we all started very young. I mean, very, very young. And I think there are cases of people learning, when they're later on in life, but you've got to put a lot of hours in, and it gets harder when you have a family and a life outside of chess. So, but I mean, even as long as you're improving, I think that's the key thing, isn't it? And enjoying it while
chess
you do
has
it. So.
changed so much in the last 10 years alone with all the technology, all the new developments, ways of learning. Is it the same in poker? I mean, just the amount of exposure, the amount of television broadcasts, for example, has that helped general understanding between players? Might tend to drop something there, sorry.
We're doing great today. What else can we drop?
Meanwhile, there's been a trade of pawns on the board, but still the status quo maintained.
I think it's somewhat against me because I noticed that every time someone asks me a question here, you're pushing something over. But to answer the question quickly, it's I think it's a whole lot easier for a chess player to become good at other mind games than it is for players who's played other games to become a good chess player. It's just something about that instinctive feel and something that you have to grow up with it to not reach the ceiling too early.
I think there's a lot of cases of chess players moving on to poker, for example. I mean, we saw Magnus Carlsen recently playing a big event, and I know Grischuk, he's won millions. Other players, there's lots of cases of that transition as well. But we do have a lot of moves in the game here, David, a bit of change in pawn structure, and how are things sort of going?
Yeah, maybe we can just show the last couple of moves. White did actually try to challenge Black's strong pawn centre here. So he pushed forward with his own pawn 2 squares. And when you push forward with your pawn 2 squares, if your opponent has a pawn ready to capture, then en passant is possible. And that's actually happened. So Anish Giri took this pawn as if it just moved 1 square. And after White recaptured, as you mentioned, Simon, a change in pawn structure. And at least temporarily, there is a pawn up for grabs in the centre of the board. Because this white bishop has been blocked in, Black can go greedy and grab White's central pawn, but I'm not sure he wants to rush with this, because after a trade, for example, White's queen just moving out the way, suddenly there's a lot of pressure. Black's pieces, which are nicely centralised, they are a bit clumsy. And White has simple ideas, for example, of bringing the rook to the centre, pinning a pawn against the Black queen. Also, there's tension on this diagonal, so White could, at some point, push his pawn forward, undermine Black's central pawn. So, yes, Black's a pawn up, but I think Black loses too much time in the process. So, just instinctively, I would spend probably most of my time calculating this move, because you can win a pawn. But if you don't see maybe a follow-up, if you don't see what to do next, how to reply to White's active moves, then you can look for alternatives. And Black has alternatives. You can move the queen 1 square forward. You can just maintain the tension there. You could think about pushing this pawn forward to try and kind of push down the board and undermine White's bishop. I have no doubt that this is what Magnus would do. We've seen enough of his games to know Magnus loves pushing his rook's pawns, especially on the queen side, actually, on this left half of the board. Just for example, if this pawn pushes forward, if White tries to get rid of it, then suddenly there are threats against this bishop. And suddenly White's position very, very loose. So lots of choice for Black. I don't think, however, that Anish should get greedy, should get tempted and take this pawn. I think greed is not good in this situation. And thinking for a while, Anish, he's probably calculating that move.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a complex middle game now, and the other thing I think reason they need to spend more time here, they're not familiar with the position, because often when you learn an opening at a lot of levels, you get used to what the opening leads to, the middle game structure. But as the opening was very unique here, they've got challenges they might not be as used to. A unique position.
Yeah, and it's also a kind of unique pawn sacrifice. I mean, certainly not something that we see on everyday chess. And, critical moment for Anish. And whilst the players are pausing for thought, I do have to share with you quite a funny answer from John Hickman, who says, our quiz of the day is, what is your chess level? He says that his chess level is chess tourist, as it's great to travel to different places to play chess, and I'm in good company, as that's how Garry Kasparov has referred to himself as in a tournament in retirement.
Well, that's a very interesting story, wasn't there? Garry Kasparov, when he was playing and when he was the world champion, he played in one competition. I don't know where, but one of the players,
Serbia, I think
it was Serbia. And one of the players in that competition was like world number 10 or something, 27, 30 or 50 rating, and Garry just said, "He's just a chess tourist."
He was
very rude about this guy.
Very rude.
And then
he kind of later beat that guy.
Crushed him.
And then he kind of came up with this terrible analogy Should I say it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we want to hear it. Yeah, definitely.
And he said he used some opening novelty of his, and he said it was like using a machine gun to swat a fly.
I think it was a nuclear. It was like using a nuclear missile to destroy a fly. This is. He's like, I wasted this opening novelty on this fly. Why did I bother? You know, it's like using a nuclear missile to destroy a fly. It's like, I thought, you know, he obviously didn't like the guy much, but I won't mention the guy's name. He's a really strong player.
He's a really strong player, you know.
Strong.
Very,
So,
good 20, I think 2,700.
I think it was 27, at least 30 at the time, when it was, you know, really, you know, strong rating. So, but that was kind of, I guess, Gary, like, you know, showing his power and, you know, showing he's the king of the animal kingdom, you know, top of the food chain there. So,
but definitely gone from chess tourist destroyer to chess tourist himself these days, Gary Kasparov.
You know, but I have to say, when it comes to chess tourists, I also sometimes describe myself as a chess tourist, because I have on occasion, and again, I'm not sure whether I should be telling everyone this, but I have chosen tournaments based on how good the food that they're serving is.
Wow.
And I literally paid one because they served amazing cake.
Meanwhile, one of the moves we mentioned, and we showed this position a few moments ago. We'll dig deeper in a moment.
Yeah.
A little curious about when it comes to Jorden van Foreest here, because I remember when he broke through, when he won in the Netherlands and he really emerged on the top scene. He was known as pretty much this opening theorist. He got himself into long opening variations, but you didn't expect much from his middle game. That's changed now, hasn't it?
That's definitely changed. I think that always changes when you're a player, when you mature. I mean, now I'm a bit older as well. I definitely try to steer the game straight to the middle game. I try to avoid any opening debate, because that's where things can go wrong. That's where the kind of variance is at its highest, in the opening. If you've missed one thing, if your opponent's computer is a bit stronger, if they've dug a bit deeper, then you could get wiped out in the opening. So Anish, Jorden, both opening specialists, but they definitely, in this game at least, they've taken the battle straight to the middle game. And yeah, as we mentioned, it is livening up. It is a bit more complicated now and a bit more forcing, perhaps. So just to rewind, Black did push this pawn forward. This is one of the moves I highlighted, and White captured this pawn. That pawn was just too much of a nuisance. Now I'm expecting Anish. OK, now he grabs the pawn. Interesting. I thought he would just bring his rook across first and undermine this bishop, at least force White onto the defensive for a move or two, and then consider what to do about the pawn structure. But no, he did decide to remove this White pawn, and as we mentioned, probably after a trade of knights, which I think is inevitable, then White just will sidestep with his queen. And still this dilemma for Black. These three pieces are targets for the White rook. This White rook at the bottom of the board, it's blocked for now, but it does have these targets, so many pieces to look at. And also this Black pawn, I think, it just doesn't feel comfortable. For example, if White gets another move, say Black just is a bit too slow here, if White gets one more move, then these two White rooks in the centre of the board are going to do so much damage. And there we go, the knight trade. And, OK, not just the queen move that I was expecting. He's even more direct, Jorden. He grabs a pawn in the centre, tactics galore, exchanges galore, because after this knight disappears, he has opened up this White rook. White's a piece down, but now he grabs the Black knight back. And after a trade here, I'm expecting to see rook takes bishop. And, yeah, a queen trade as well. Everything flying off the board. Suddenly the vacuum cleaner is out. And in this current position, White is a pawn up, but one of those extra pawns lies on the A file, and these pawns are weak, very, very weak, and easy targets for the Black rooks. I'm surprised Jorden rushed into this. I mean, it was actually not even on my radar, that knight takes pawn move, but trading things off when you've got such weaknesses. Yes, you might be a pawn up temporarily, but Black's bishop holds everything together, and White's bishop, it takes a while for it to become a strong piece again.
Yeah, and
Okay,
also, you know, from a very selfish point of view, I really liked the pattern on the board when nearly all of Black's minor pieces were on the E line. It's not often you see that.
It's quite nice creating patterns on the board, isn't it?
It
I
is.
I agree.
I mean, it's beautiful. Yeah. I mean, how could you just get rid of it?
I know. Well, what you want to do here is clearly go bishop f3 to e2. If David can maybe show that, you know, can we do that? So this would have been the best move. And then,
for example, this pattern.
This would have been the
everything,
way to play.
the whole E file occupied. This would have been the type of thing we wanted to see, but instead we did see everything get hoovered off. And if we do fast forward back again to the current position, yes, White is trying to activate his bishop. Maybe he's trying to trade off for Black's kind of... this Black bishop is like a plug at the moment, holding everything together. But I think the drawing margin is very high here for Anish. For example, he can just move his rook forward. I'm not sure which square, but just create a path for his other rook to come and gang up against these weaknesses. Sometimes we talk about passed pawns as strengths, but here these two pawns are easy targets. One of them for sure is going to drop off. And
it looks to me like it's going to be exchange town coming up, and I would have thought the bishops, the rooks, pawns, they're coming off. Maybe even one side might have a pawn advantage, but I think the other side will get a lot of activity in exchange. So I think a draw is looking the most likely at the moment here, certainly.
And OK, that move has happened. So Black lifting his rook up the board, creating a path. Doubling up rooks is always an effective strategy when your opponent has weaknesses to target. So yeah, good move there from Anish. He's low on the clock, 4 minutes, but after the queens came off, after everything got traded, 4 minutes is plenty of time for Black.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think Jorden missing an opportunity. He had nearly double Anish's time, and he had so much tension to play with. That's where he's been successful against Anish in the past, in these kind of complicated middle games.
And this position is really simple. You know, it's very obvious. You highlighted the plan that Anish will follow, and it just makes sense. You know, White has some pawn weaknesses. Attack those pawn weaknesses at the end. And yeah, definitely, I think a bad decision from Jorden. I agree. And
yeah, I mean, he's not worse, he's not losing or anything, Jorden, but no more winning chances, I feel, for White. If anything, I would take Black here.
And I was just going to, whilst Jorden is thinking about what to do, we have some really good answers when we come into this really simple question: what is your chess level? And everyone at home is coming up with these awesome answers. Jerry Graham,
Hello,
organiser of Banratty, he says that
quite possibly the best chess tournament in the world. he paid me to say that, but no, it is a great tournament in Ireland.
He says my chess level is more like pub level chess because I don't seem to play anywhere else.
Very drunken pub level chess, I'd say as well.
That's a good level to be at.
It's a good friendly level, right? You know, you have the most fun, when, you know, you're sat there with your friends, enjoying it.
It's quite interesting because Banratty is a tournament in Ireland. It was cancelled this year, and it's really drawn in some great players in the past, like we mentioned Peter Svidler, other players, Wesley So, because it's in Ireland, it's a very friendly tournament. But this year we surprised him actually by going over there and streaming from the pub. So it was an online tournament instead. So we took our computers into the pub in Ireland and just met Jerry there in the pub. So it was, so it was a pub tournament over in Banratty, and it was very nice, good fun. So back to the game, and I don't think much is changing really here, is it, David, so far?
I don't know. I'm very surprised. Every move from Jorden, I just can't guess it. I've played him many times, and that's always the case. I can never guess Jorden van Foreest's moves. And if we jump to the current position, as you mentioned, Simon, nothing will happen. We're heading towards a draw if the bishops come off. If Black, for example, plays bishop takes bishop, the white rook recaptures, everything's just going to get traded off. Black will win his pawn back here, but in the meantime, White's rook is going to go hunting for pawns as well. And everything will get traded, rooks, pawns. It's going to be a draw. I think if Anish wants to win, then there is an option of pushing his pawn forward. It's a bit risky. The black bishop is now a bit loose. It's temporarily defended by the black rook, but wherever the white bishop goes now, for example, if it steps back, OK, he does trade the bishops. I was going to say now the black king can start centralising itself. I would be very tempted to start pushing this majority. Black has 4 pawns on this side of the board against 3. He could have pushed and tried to win, but
what about this move?
And another move that might be surprising. Jorden's going for the ugliest pawn structure award.
I think he's winning that award. Look, doubled isolated pawns here, an isolated pawn here, doubled isolated pawns, and another isolated
Hang on a second. Didn't he lose yesterday against Wei Yu with these two sets of double pawns?
That's true. And actually, yesterday against Wei Yi, with colours reversed, he had exactly this structure, and he ended up losing. And it was a double rook endgame. So Jorden, he's not learning from past mistakes. Maybe it's fine here. I guess he wanted to keep his rook in the centre, attacking this kind of backward pawn of Black's. But
I don't think I could play that move, even if it's the best move. I just don't think I could bring myself to taking and doubling another set of pawns. You know, it's just visually like, you know, it just makes me feel a bit nauseous. You know, I just couldn't do it. I mean, I don't know. Would you guys?
Well, the thing is, though, there's terrible pawns. I mean, just imagine if the black king, look at it, it's coming forward, and give it 2 more moves, and it might make its way over to the f5 square and start like nibbling on some pawns. I don't know.
Later one day. Yeah, later.
Yeah.
easy path towards the weaknesses. I think temporarily, though, White should be fine. White needs to go active with his remaining rooks. This is a good lesson for everyone. If you have long-term weaknesses, like bad pawns, go active with your pieces, play for the short term, play dynamically, energetically, and White's rook has to come up the board now, I feel, just to attack and kind of team up against Black's weaknesses. So Jorden is not worse, he's not losing, but ugly, strange decisions from him.
I'm just having a bit of a glance on the evaluation on the other games here, and it seems like it's a very drawish start today, except for Vidit, who's getting a really strong start against Shanklin with black pieces. It seems like everything is quite equal, at least evaluation-wise.
Yeah, maybe they're just warming up, and you called it moving day earlier, and for me that's a new phrase, but
that's a golf reference, by the way.
Okay.
The third day of a 4-day tournament is always the moving day, because that's when you position yourself in the tables, and then you get ready for the final day.
I thought you were talking about moving flats, and I was like, what have I missed? But yeah, moving day, and maybe it's just the nerves. They know this is the calm before the storm. I mean, the next few games, players are going to need to take big risks to try and win, to try and position themselves in the top 8. And
another move that we couldn't predict there. Sorry, I just again, this is every Jorden move is unpredictable at the moment. Why put the rook there?
When he could go to the 7th row.
I mean, just why?
I don't understand.
I mean, rooks on the 7th are supposed to be, well, they are good. Dating back to Nimzovich, who pointed that out. And in a rook ending, you put your rooks on the most active square. Why? Why put it there? I mean, I think he's still okay, but I still, just don't quite understand these moves.
Yeah, but, I think he is still OK for now, but he needs to start playing some really accurate moves, because if things go wrong, that really bad pawn structure is going to come and, just benefit Anish.
Yeah, it's the trend as well. It's not just one big blunder, which we haven't seen from either player so far, but it's just a series of small, strange, maybe strategic mistakes from Jorden, which may eventually add up to something bigger. And here we go, Black's remaining rook, the only piece that wasn't participating for Black. It's found an open file. It has squares to jump into in White's half. It has targets, as we've seen, with all of the weak White pawns.
Do you think it's enough to push for a win?
Anish is definitely the one playing for the win here. I think even if everything goes wrong for Anish, he should still be able to draw this game. But if things go wrong for Jorden, all of White's pawns are dropping off. So, yes, it's equal according to the computer at least, or roughly equal, but the margin for error, I mean, it's tiny now for Jorden.
I mean, for instance, I really like Anish's last move. After all, Jorden voluntarily gave up his control of the open line, put a rook there. But I'm thinking that rook can go to the beautiful 6th row and start looking at... on the board.
Jovanka.
Love it when that happens. It's like, bingo, yeah, got it right.
Never happens to me, so just enjoy it, yeah? Just enjoy it while it's there, But, yeah, it's a great idea, Jovanka, and the idea is you just want to use that rook and attack, right?
Yeah, there's nothing sophisticated about that move.
Yeah, and simple plan, you want to go after White's pawns. White can start attacking Black's pawns. Black only has really one weakness, but this can be easily defended. For example, if the White rook steps across, Black can just step his own rook up the board and kind of lock things down, defend this pawn, and still the same idea at some point, maybe of the Black rook coming across. Or maybe even here, the Black rook steps up to the 5th rank. And again, ideas of going after weak pawns later in the game. Still should be a draw with best play. Let's get that straight. But it's all about Anish Giri now and whether he can probe, whether he can look for weaknesses and maybe make Jorden a bit nervous. The longer you have pawns like this, the more nervous you get. I think Jorden would love to just kind of offer, shake hands, get out of this game with a draw. But Anish, despite his clock time, despite having less time on the, despite being under 2 minutes now, he will want to kind of get a bit of revenge.
I have to say, guys, as well, I mean, I don't normally do this, but I had to look at our friend's game, Gwaine Jones against the world champion, and what on earth is going on there? We'll get a chance to have a look at this after this game, guaranteed. We'll definitely have a look at this game, but that is absolutely mad, and it looks like a dragon opening to me, which is but we will come back to that, I'm sure, because that is just I don't know what's happening there. Pieces have been thrown on the board randomly by the looks of it, just in my eyes. So
yeah, and the game between Jones and Carlson, it definitely looks like someone has just kind of done a lucky dip, just thrown pieces on and just seen where they fall. And,
that's right. So very interesting.
I've just been looking at the evaluations, and they've been kind of going mad at times as well.
But sometimes the evaluation bar can't be trusted, because, like, going back to that game of Gwaine Jones against Magnus Carlsen, it's crazy, but the evaluation bar is like, meh, meh, Middle.
just saying draw.
Yeah,
just saying it's equal, which is
0.00, you know, all is good.
And another shocking move here from Jorden. He's just given up one of his pawns.
Don't get
I
it.
would never guess this. I understand sacrificing pawns in the opening middle game to gain time, to gain squares, gain activity for your pieces, but in an endgame, pawns are everything. Why can't Black just take this pawn?
Take it.
It's been impossible to predict his moves. I mean, why are you, first of all, giving yourself that pawn weakness? Then why are you giving up the pawn? That pawn could be back in front of the king. Yeah. You could have the same position here, but that white pawn, which has just been moved, could be one square in front of the king. Why play like this? I mean, it seems rather suicidal to me, this.
I guess his idea is to go on the attack in an endgame, but after Black's pawn captures the white pawn, I guess he wants to swing across, and now Black does have a target over here. The Black king can defend it, but now maybe he wants to swing his other rook up the board. He wants to lift his rook across and start going for the Black king, but somehow it feels a bit superficial. It feels as if, for example, Black can just push a pawn forward. Suddenly, actually, these three pawns are really launching forward, and Black can maybe, worst comes to worst, hide the king in the corner. Maybe Black can hide the other way as well, because the Black rook guards this pawn. OK, we're bound to see something like this, because this is the current position. Black's king did indeed step forward, and White's rook doing the same.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Anish's king move, actually, because it kind of, the line that you showed made perfect sense. Hide the king on the first row, the 8th row, and then have the two rooks horizontally defend their pawns. But here, you know, maybe there's a little bit of danger. Yeah. Actually, there's a lot of danger. What am I talking about? You know, the rook check is actually quite
really weird square to move. The king, Ivanka, I agree. I mean, why not try to keep it safe? And is he really going to try to go passive? But he can't. He can't go behind the pawn, can he?
No, he can't. And the pawn on h6 is also vulnerable to attack. And you know, when you were going, why? It just reminded me of like that record, why? And I was like...
Hang on a minute here. Have we got a rapping Ivanka in the house? I'll give you a little bit of a beatbox. Are we ready?
No, I can't do those things. I'm not a rapper. I'm not a rapper at all.
Rap. No, give it a go. You were starting off there. No?
Yeah.
No? Oh, it's not going to happen. Is it going to happen?
Simon, no.
No, OK, right, back to the chess.
I love the beatbox, though.
Wow, I was trying. Oh, dear.
You'll rap one day, Ivanka.
Yeah.
I mean, meanwhile, strange decisions from both sides, but one thing we have to focus on is that Anish Giri is under 30 seconds. I think if he had more time, he would have actually found a better path in the last few moves. And maybe that clock situation will stop him from winning this game.
Do you believe that Jorden got himself in trouble here with poor offensive choices or poor defensive choices?
It's a bit of both. I think when he should have been defensive, he tried to be a bit too offensive. And I think in endgames especially, that's one area that, I mean, you can't really play kind of hard and fast with the rules. You have to just play the position. If you've got weak pawns, defend them. Just lock things down, hold the line. You can't just give away pawns, throw things forward, kind of make things happen when there's no actual energy behind your pieces. There's just not enough material left on the board. So it's surprising to me that he's trying to go active in a position where he didn't need to do anything, but it is his style, and it's brought him a long way in the chess world. And I think when he masters that, in the endgame at least, kind of when to go on the attack, when to just sit, I think he's going to be kind of a top 10 fixture for years.
But is that also one of the problems for Giri, the fact that he's unable to win as many games as he should be based on his positions?
Yes, and I think Anish, he loves control. Against Jorden, you never get control. That's one thing. If Anish doesn't win this one, I think he's going to be kicking himself.
Yeah, they are like opposites, aren't they? I mean, it does seem that way. That Anish, he does love control, and Jorden loves losing control, it seems, you know.
Anish is the ice, Jordan's the fire.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's true. And it's a very interesting clash of styles. And it's another thing I love about chess. And again, we're talking about poker, and you probably get this in poker, just the different styles. I mean, maybe one's not better than the other. In chess, you get that a lot, that, you know, people show their personality on the board, which is, I
think that goes for a lot of mind games. One style is not necessarily better, but one player will always be better in the long run.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you just reminded me of this little fable I heard this morning about the scorpion and the frog. Have you guys heard of it?
Nope.
No?
I think so. On the back of the...
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I have.
Yeah, like the scorpion asks the frog, hey, can you give me a lift and on your back and take me across the water? And the frog goes, no. You're going to sting me, and bad things are going to happen. The scorpion's going to go. The scorpion said, of course, don't be stupid. That will never happen. I mean, that wouldn't be beneficial for both of us. And here we see a pawn move, and of course they swim across the thing, and of course the scorpion stings the frog. They're both drowning, and the frog asks why, and he goes, well, I'm a scorpion. It's in my nature.
You've been looking for that H-pawn for a while, David. It suddenly arrived.
Exactly, and I know that Simon perked up right there as soon as Harry the H-pawn.
I was listening to Ivanka's story. I was thinking about beatboxing in the background. So
Right. Yeah.
The scorpion. No, okay.
Suddenly things are really livening up, and suddenly it's a 3-result game again. I was saying that things were going in Black's favour, but Black has lost control. Anish Giri's lost control, and we know he likes that control. Let's jump in the current position. White's rook is actually under attack from this black pawn, but when it moves, I'm not sure exactly where it wants to go, to be honest. It can go up the board. For example, this white rook, it can just slide across, but no matter where it goes, White has this huge card up his sleeve now, this white pawn. For example, if the black rook kind of gets greedy, White's pawn is only 3 squares away from promotion now, and it's a race. Black's king is actually on the wrong side. Black's king would love to be on the other side of its own pawn here, just so that it can kind of stop Harry from running, but Harry has 2 supporters, the 2 white rooks, and even if Black goes active in a situation like this, White can just defend. Still very, very tricky for Black to stop this guy from running.
Strange game, isn't it? This one,
really
I have to say.
Weird game.
I think you can tell that they know each other very well. They're obviously, when you're playing someone from the same country, there's a little bit more at stake because you play in the national team. You are probably more friendly with them, or you know them better at least. So it seems nervous game this to me.
Yes, certainly. And when you're talking about nerves, Anish only has 15 seconds on the clock, and that's why he played a safety first move, retreated the rook to the 8th row, just to keep an eye on that rogue Harry the H-pawn. And yeah, I mean, you said that they know each other really well, but for a long time, Jorden was working with Anish.
Yeah, and it was really interesting. We recorded a couple of podcasts, one with Anish, one with Jorden, and there's a bit of tension there, maybe. They both admitted to it because Jorden did work with Anish, and moving on to work with Magnus, of course, there's some rivalry. There's debate about what opening ideas are secret. Kind of sharing knowledge is always difficult. But, OK, meanwhile, Black is going active with his king, but why did he give up this pawn?
Panic.
Is he going... Sorry, Ivanka.
I was going to say panic, because...
But he's threatening checkmate.
It's a brilliant idea.
Wow.
You've got to show this one.
OK, Anish has such a sneaky idea in mind. I was wondering why he gave up a pawn, but now if White is careless and, for example, just does a nothing move, then suddenly Black is going to play rook takes pawn, and this wins, sacrificing a rook, kind of tricking the white king into coming forward, and then bang, the king is trapped on the side of the board. Simply no escape squares. The black king and the 2 black pawns actually cut off all escape squares for this white king. So in the current position, this is a winning threat for Anish Giri. Rook takes pawn. How does he stop this? Suddenly the white king maybe has to just run away at some point, just run away back to safety before it's too late. As well, if the black rook comes across and cuts off the white king's escape route, it's game over. Suddenly, Jorden, with 25 seconds, he needs to either run away with his king or maybe go active with his own rook just to start kind of the counterattack against Black's king. Maybe bring the rook across after rook takes pawn, running away with his own king. That is the key.
I don't know about this move. He's played his rook over, but...
This wins for Black now, and there we go, the evaluation bar. OK, not even that. He's trapped the white rook. Let's go back to the players, because...
What a trick.
The white rook is suddenly trapped. It has no squares to go to. Anish is about to take the win. We saw Jorden kind of cover his face for a second, and there we go. Do we have a result? One move, it all turns around, and Anish wins.